What's going on, everybody? Part 3 to the how, when, and where of leadership. I got this idea because I heard about this new tool and I've been using it. So I was looking up online some of the most searched phrases around leadership on a site called answerthepublic.com. And I'm giving them more advertising than I intended to, but thought it was interesting. I thought it was an interesting concept to go and look at what people are asking and try to answer those questions. So we're going to do that. And this is the last video in a 3-part series video, or if you're listening on Apple or Spotify or Google Podcasts, then you're listening there. So we are on to where questions that people have been asking with regards to leadership. So here we go. Where leadership starts. And the second one is where leadership begins. Where do y'all think leadership begins? It's interesting because everyone talks about, I actually had someone comment on my video that I posted on one of my social channels the other day. They were basically saying, you know, if you're not a leader if no one follows you. Well, I don't necessarily agree with that because, yeah, I mean, ultimately you lead people and you build up other leaders. I mean, that is the end goal of leadership, right? Like, there's no point. I mean, maybe there's a point, but if you're off by yourself and no one's following you, it's not really doing anybody any good. But I will say this: at some point, one person has to stand alone when it comes to leadership, and a leader has to be willing to stand alone and to challenge the status quo and to go against the grain. And this is something that is hard to do. And at first, leaders might not necessarily have a lot of followers. Maybe very few, maybe just one or two. Depends on the environment. It depends on what the situation is. It depends on what people are doing. And I don't think necessarily that leadership requires a lot of followers, because I personally think leadership is about doing the right thing when the situation calls. And if there's a bunch of people that are doing the wrong thing, then you need to stick to your guns as a leader and do what's right. It's not necessarily about just influencing. So I think there's good and bad motivation behind leadership, if that makes sense. So, to me, to the values of GLE, to faith, love, integrity, courage, if the leadership is in the wrong direction, yeah, cool, great leadership. But to me, that's not real what leadership is all about. So that's, to me, where leadership starts. Leadership starts with one person having the courage to act, having the integrity, loving people enough, and having enough faith to act when the world might be against them. And when they know they're going to face resistance, they still have that courage to act. That is where leadership starts or begins. Where leadership is important, everywhere. We hit this already. When is leadership important? All the time. Where is it important? Everywhere. Every situation calls for leadership. You can step up and lead, be a leader. You can lead the followers, be the best follower. There's all sorts of different aspects to leadership. You can lead in any situation, and you should find ways to do so. If you see needs, go meet them. Leadership, where are we going? That's an interesting one. I'm not sure the context there. Leadership, where are we going? I don't know. Where are we going? Do you guys know where we're going? We're living in some crazy times. Where are we going? I'm not sure, but I have faith, and I'm going to go love and go forth with courage and integrity, and trust that it's all going to work out for the good of those who love and trust in Almighty God. So that's all we can do. Where does leadership reside? Where does leadership reside? It resides in individuals. Leadership is all about individuals and empowering individuals to be the best form of what they can be and help others to do the same thing. Again, leaders start standing alone, they gain followers. Those followers eventually become other leaders at some point that'll separate themselves from just the followers, right? Where does leadership come from? I think it comes from an attitude of giving, an attitude of love. Leadership comes from sacrifice. We've touched a lot about this. This is consistent stuff. Situations where leadership is important, where autocratic leadership is used. Autocratic. What does autocratic mean? I should know. Autocratic. Yeah. Absolute power, taking no account of other people's wishes or opinions, domineering. So autocratic leadership is interesting. I guess you could say that's the top-down approach. There's all sorts of ways to lead, and at some point, accountability does fall ultimately to one. And there's a lot of different philosophies of groupthink and committee style management, the lead by committee, that sort of thing. Personally, I don't like if everyone's accountable, nobody's accountable. And so, it's kind of like the United States, we got a presidential election going on, right? It all comes down to one, even though that one, there's all sorts of mechanisms in place. That one person can only do so much, right? But ultimately, it all comes down to somebody, right? Like it has to. It can't be, if it falls on a committee, then it falls on nobody. So that is the ultimate, autocratic sort of mode. And, when I say autocratic, I don't mean I'm encouraging top-down leadership per se, but at some level, somebody's got to make the call. And, even if you're allowing others to make the call and just supporting it, it's your call at some level. So, leaders got to realize that. They got to own that. And it's a heavy responsibility. It's a heavy responsibility. Now, I personally think a wise leader seeks advice, seeks good, godly, wise counsel, right? And isn't going to be domineering, isn't going to be autocratic in their leadership. Now, there's a time to dictate down, and there's a time to allow people to flex a little bit, but leaders surround themselves with people smarter than they are. Leaders play to their strengths, they hire to their weaknesses, and build up other people around them. You always want to be, this is just good advice in general, you always want to be in the bottom of your group in terms of success, smarts, whatever. So, if you're the average of the 5 people you're around, you always want to be number 5 on the list. And then when you become number 1, you need to get a different group. Not that you just leave people in the dust and forget about them, but you got to go, if you're a person who's doesn't want to be average, if you're a person that wants to go above and beyond, then if you're number 5 and after growing, now you're number 1, you need to get a different group to keep challenging yourself, keep challenging your thinking. Association, purposeful association is huge. All good leaders know that. All good leaders surround themselves with good people, good mentors, and smart people who are constantly challenging them to think better and be better. And I hope you got something out of this, y'all. This has been a fun series. It came from the idea of really, what are people asking about leadership? What do people want to know? And we took from answerthepublic.com. We took the top questions, the how, when, and where of leadership. And I hope you got something out of this. If you did, share it, rate it, subscribe, and I hope you all have a great 2021. We got some good guests coming your way, so stay tuned, and I hope you all go lead everything.